The first key concept that we want to consider on our journey of understanding a faster, lighter, more empowering journey of resolving past pains and traumatic experiences is the idea and concept known as an emotional memory image. Now, an emotional memory image is the information or the data that the brain stores following an intense experience. So, for example, whether that experience is a moment where you feel overwhelmed, whether it's a moment where you feel threatened, where it's a moment where there's intense anger or intense stress, in each of these moments, because the emotion is so high and the brain perceives this as being important, the mind stores information about the event and it stores it in the form of an emotional memory image. Now, these emotional memory images are stored outside your normal waking awareness in the subconscious mind, which from an anatomical perspective we can think about as being stored primarily in the amygdala and hippocampus. And it's these areas that store the emotional memory image, and it's the activation of this emotional memory image which causes the ongoing reactions following a traumatic event. So if we think about it, your brain has a stored active record of data that is associated with all of those intense negative emotions from that particular event. And your mind recorded that data during the event, so your mind knows exactly just how painful it was for you. And your brain, first and foremost, wants you to stay alive. Therefore, no matter how much you might talk it through with someone, how much courage you have to delve into all the painful details week after week, and how good the temporary cathartic release might be, while your brain still has the active record of that dangerous or threatening event, it is not going to let those protective emergency alarm responses stop because it still perceives the threat as being there. And this makes total sense. If the brain is still perceiving a threat, just because you talk about it wouldn't mean that it would let that go. And following the storage of this emotional memory image, the mind then continues to scan your environment in a process known as neuroception, which we'll come to in a few moments. And it's this scanning of your environment that creates a state of hypervigilance where your system just feels on edge and you feel highly reactive to even small stimuli. And so when we look at past emotional challenges in this way, we can see exactly why your brain is doing what it's doing and how talking about it is not going to be the answer to resolving it. And hopefully this can help you appreciate why your brain is doing what it's doing just a little bit more. And it also helps us to understand what we need to do or what we need to access, where we need to target our intervention if we really want to naturally resolve the issue. And it's worth noting here that an emotional memory image is based on the subjective experience of what is overwhelming. So what is overwhelming for one person is going to be totally different for what is overwhelming for another. And also what is overwhelming for you as a 5-year-old is going to be much, much different to what's overwhelming to you as a 25-year-old. And so we can all probably remember many experiences when we were younger where we were overwhelmed, and it's those moments that also generate emotional memory images. So if we can kind of recap this idea, an emotional memory image is a stored mental representation of an intense event. And anatomically, it's stored in the amygdala and hippocampus. Now, in most cases, these emotional memory images are outside of your conscious awareness. So even though you're going about your day and you're not consciously thinking about them, these emotional memories from the past are still sitting in the background and are basically operating out of your awareness but still influencing your reactions. Now, when it comes to the brain, your brain prioritizes survival over anything else, so it will initiate reactions before any logical systems can come in, and it activates the alarms when a possible threat is detected. And when I talk about a possible threat, what I mean is whenever you go into a certain situation, environment, or context, if your mind can link what you're going through in that moment in any way to that original event, it will trigger the alarm bells. And that means you might go into a very similar context. It might be only similar in a very particular way. It might even be symbolic of the original event. But if your mind can make a link between now and that danger, it will trigger the alarm bells to make sure that you either respond in the same way, so you stay alive, or you can respond differently. And the result of this is that talking has limited impact because it doesn't deactivate those emotional records. And so the brain continues to perceive danger, and so it still reacts. And this ongoing hypervigilance, so the scanning of your environment, is the brain's continuous scanning process to look for threats, and it's known as neuroception, which we'll cover more next.